just talk to us about the feasibility of moving the entire civilian population out of Rafah? Is that even physically doable?
There's a lot of folks there, MJ, more than 1 million. Some estimates have it almost at 1.5 million. That's a lot of people that move down to Rafah to get out of the fighting. And so again, the task of providing for their safety at that number and in such confined spaces is difficult. There's no question about it. That's going to be a heavy lift. For any military, it would be a heavy lift. But that's the conversation that we want to keep having with our Israeli counterparts. I don't know what it's going to look like. We can't tell you what it's going to look like. That's really for the IDF to speak to. But it absolutely has to be accounted for.
But do you think it is a realistic goal, that it is viable to try to move those people out of that area?
Well, let's see what the Israeli Defense Forces come up with.
And if they go ahead with the ground incursion anyway, before the civilian population can safely be moved out of that area, would there be any consequences from the U.S.? I know Trevor just asked a question about, potentially stripping, military support or security assistance. What would the consequence be for Israel if they went ahead and did that anyway?
I don't want to get into hypotheticals on that. We've been very clear with our Israeli counterparts privately and publicly about what our expectations are for the treatment of the innocent people that are down there near Rafah. And we're going to continue, as I mentioned to Trevor, we're going to continue to support Israel. They have a right and responsibility to go after Hamas. We're going to make sure that they can continue to do that. But as from the very beginning, we want to make sure that they do that in a way that fully accounts for the preservation of innocent life and civilian infrastructure.
And just since the president is about to meet with a close ally that publicly supports a ceasefire in Gaza, can you just talk to us about whether the president's thinking on that has evolved at all? Is he a little bit closer to potentially supporting that publicly than, say, a month ago? Has his thinking on that evolved at all?
We haven't changed in terms of our desire to see an extended pause. So that we can get all the hostages home with their families where they belong, so we get additional security assistance in, and we can see a reduction in the violence. We are still focused on trying to get an extended humanitarian pause.
I'm asking about a permanent pause.
I know what you're asking. What I'm saying is we support and continue to support an extended humanitarian pause.
Thanks, great. Thanks, John. You talk, I know you can't give specifics about consequences, but would the United States policy change under any circumstances? You talk about an obligation to protect civilians. The president has talked about over-the-top, indiscriminate bombings. Is there anything, would there be any consequences? Would the U.S. policy change, or is it support no matter what?
I just won't get ahead of where we are right now, and I'm certainly not going to engage hypotheticals. We want to make sure Israel can continue to defend itself. We want to make sure that humanitarian assistance continues to flow to the people of Gaza, and by no means has there been enough. There needs to be more. And we want to get all those hostages home. We believe that the best way to accomplish those three goals is to get an extended pause in place, to bring the violence down, to get people out and get aid in, and that's what we're focused on. And I get the thrust of the question. I'm just not going to engage in hypotheticals about changes in policy.
Concern that you can give to the Israelis to help protect the civilians?
We have communicated, again, consistently and stridently since the beginning of the conflict. Since the time the president went to Tel Aviv on the 17th of October, just a week or so after the attacks, how important it is that Israel knows it's going to have our support and that they do everything they can to protect innocent life.
On another question, if I may, why did the president allow his campaign? The president allow his campaign to go on TikTok despite the national security review of the platform?
I'd have to refer you to the campaign.
But it's still the president of the United States. The president is sending a message to Americans about the safety of TikTok by doing this.
I'd have to refer you to the campaign on that decision.
Thanks, Queen. Thanks, Admiral. Sorry to press you on this issue of Rafah, but and you say there's, we're not going to talk about possible halting military aid. You're not going to talk about consequences. What leverage does the White House actually have in terms of ensuring that Israel does not launch a military offensive in Rafah, without taking the necessary steps?
Well, I don't think you're all that sorry about pressing me on this, but I'll go ahead. And, it's okay. It's all right. Look, it's not about leverage. It's about being consistent. And I've said it before just in the last few minutes. It's about being consistent about our desire to make sure Israel can defend itself so that October 7th can't happen again.